And welcome to the How to Add Online Voting to Co-op Elections webinar. My name is Tony Hoff, Marketing Director here at SBS, and joining me here today is my friend and colleague, Matt D. Fiala. Matt serves SBS as an account manager who partners with co-ops all across the country, helping to put in place transparent elections that also help increase member participation. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Tony, and I appreciate everyone else on the webinar as well.
Absolutely. So before we dive into to the content, I do want to point out a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we are recording today's session, and we will send the recording out after today's webinar, along with a follow-up doc that outlines some next steps if you're an organization that's considering making changes to your election or needing to update your bylaws, kind of some best practices to follow, making sure that you can get through that process. Also, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. So if you have any questions along the way, simply add them to the Q&A section of the webinar, or feel free to put them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer as many of those as possible at the end of the session. So with that, we thought a good place to start was to address the elephant in the virtual room, so to speak, and talk about how co-op voting has changed in the last year. And to be honest, it's changed a lot in the last 3 to 5 years, with a lot of organizations adding mail-in balloting or adding electronic voting. But once we got into 2020 last year and the pandemic set in, it really fast forwarded the timeline for a lot of organizations to make those changes. Some of them were in between a rock and a hard place, where maybe their annual meeting is typically where they had the election, but they couldn't have a large meeting or a gathering where a number of people would show up for quorum. So they had to adjust things on the fly. And even before that, there was organizations that were struggling to get candidates to run. A lot of organizations on the nomination side were traditionally having members come into your lobbies to pick up a paper packet to fill out or to collect signatures. And with lobbies closed and things like that, they were unable to do that. So we saw a huge shift last year of organizations moving to online nominations, and some did it themselves, where they posted their applications as downloadable PDFs or as a form on their website. Others worked with us to build a customized site where they could sign in and fill out their application and upload photos and send electronic petitions as well. Moving back into the election side, some of these organizations and these co-ops were challenged to find ways to, how do we reach quorum? How do we get our members to participate in the election? And some of them mailed ballots for the first time. Some offered online voting for the first time. And anytime you have 2 or more elections, we like to call those a hybrid election. And to borrow a tagline from a longtime client partner of ours, Rachel, she said to us a long time ago, the benefits for her co-op of going to a hybrid model was that they were able to engage their members from a distance. And that has stuck with me over the years, because it rings more true today, I think, than ever before, as your members want to engage with the co-op. They want to participate in the governance process. And if you're able to provide them a paper ballot or electronic ballot or a telephone or in person, you're giving them multiple ways to connect with a co-op. And that is absolutely a best practice that many are trying to adhere to and follow. And then lastly, virtual meetings. I think we've all sat in on probably a few too many Zoom calls over the last year where, you're on mute, or we all know kind of the struggles of those. And one group that we found had a big need were the board of directors. The learning curve there was a little bit steeper for some, or the technology gap was a little bit more. So joining the Zoom call, participating in those meetings was a challenge for some. We partnered with a lot of organizations to help with the voting aspect of a director meeting, where we have a platform that dovetails with Zoom or GoToMeeting, what have you, so that you can run your meeting, you can see each other, and then have a secure vote on the other side. Now, we also saw a number of orgs that offered virtual annual meetings, and some of them had voting, some didn't. But what I can tell you is, as we look ahead to the next couple of years, is that need for a hybrid solution, whether it's in your nominations, your voting, or your virtual meetings, is going to be there. Your members are going to want to engage in different ways. Some will want to be back in person. Others will like to participate remotely or digitally, and being able to provide multiple options is only going to help strengthen your relationship with your members and the cooperative. So all that being said, Matt, as we look ahead to organizations who maybe are considering making a change, or maybe legislation is in the works to be changed to where they might be able to add new voting options, and specifically to online voting, what are the steps that they need to take in order to get there?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So number one, before you do anything, you need to make sure that your state statutes allow for online voting or consider electronic voting. If they don't, that's fine. You just got to make sure to work with your legislator and tell them the importance that electronic voting is having in the future, especially in the cooperative market. And the next thing is, if your state statutes do allow for online voting, and I know recently Montana and Colorado have had their state statutes passed to include electronic voting. One of the key parts of that legislation is going to be if those early ballots can count towards quorum. As long as you do that, then basically you should hit quorum, including electronic balloting in your process within the first 2 days, if not the first day. One thing to consider with the quorum, though, that we're seeing as of late, especially with COVID and 2020 and 2021, is some co-ops are now going to virtual meetings for annual meetings, or they're not allowing in-person meeting, or basically the voting ends, that's it. So one thing you want to make sure is some ballots are including those meeting minutes from the previous years and the financial statements, just to make sure that everything is teed up, and when you do your virtual annual meeting, or if you don't have it, that counts towards the quorum and the requirements that your board needs to make that meeting official. And then also you want to make sure that you amend your deadlines and requirements for the notice of the election. And lastly, let's just say, like I said, if you don't have your state statutes don't allow for electronic voting, make sure to work with your legislature and get that passed, because like I said before, one of the big things that is occurring in the co-op market that Tony and I have seen is we work with over 200 cooperatives, and from 2018 to the current, 70% of the co-ops we work with are either doing a hybrid or electronic voting method. And that's a key detail, because there's a big shift moving with cooperatives to engage the members, like our client said, from a distance, and including that electronic voting. Oh, Tony, you're on mute.
Thank you, sir. So once the legislation process takes place, and say that now the state allows electronic voting, what the next step typically is amending the bylaws, right? So can you help outline what are some of those key components of updating your bylaws or bylaw votes in general?
Yeah, exactly, Tony. So number one is the very first step is to work with your legal counsel to make sure the changes that are going to be made, they'll go through those, update them in the verbiage, cross out things that are going to be changed, add the verbiage that's going to be there. Once the legal counsel has done their part, then the next step usually is to meet with the board, show them the changes that want to be made. The board will go through it. I'm sure they're going to have questions and concerns. Once those all get addressed and you get your final version of how the bylaw or articles of incorporation change will look like, the final process is one, it's going to have to be approved by the board. They're going to vote on it. As we know, each co-op is unique and not everything in their bylaws is the same. So one co-op might be, once the board approves it, then that's it, and the bylaws have been changed. Now, some co-ops basically, once the board makes that measure and approves it, then it has to go out to vote to the membership. And within the membership, there's going to be a couple different things that you'll need to check with your legal counsel and your bylaws. Number one is, what is the quorum going to be to either approve or yes for those changes? And what we see, for an example, is, let's take Co-op A, and basically what they say is in their bylaws, of all the members that vote in the election, for a measure to pass, it has to meet the two-thirds quorum for that measure. So as long as they get 66% or higher, that measure would pass. Now in co-op B, it might be where they have to have 2/3 of their entire membership to vote. And so as long as you know what you're needing to do, that's a big part of it. And then lastly, a lot of co-ops ask us, it's one of the biggest questions is, you know, if we're going to do bylaw vote, should we do it separately or should we combine it with the director election? And one thing that we know, and Tony will dive into this, is there's some pros and cons to that. So Tony can work through some of the cons, and then I'll go through the pro of it.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And so, yeah, as we were getting ready for this webinar, we talked to a number of folks about what are the pros and cons of running your director election at the same time as a bylaw vote. And I'll pull all these up on the screen here at one time, because we got an awful lot of feedback on some of the reasons why you may want to rethink doing that. And the number one was that if your election is uncontested that year, you may have members who choose not to participate, right? If the first thing they see on that ballot is a couple of director seats that are unopposed, they may not work their way down. On the flip side of that, some organizations might have a lot of candidates, or you might have to structure your bylaw votes where each individual amendment needs to be voted on individually. Then you can have a full ballot, and you could have voter fatigue where members are going to look at it and maybe vote on a couple of things and be done with it. So you have to be able to adjust accordingly and make sure that if you have a full slate or maybe a little bit of slate, that may impact the voting participation on the bylaw vote itself. Also, too, if your organization has single member district voting, where if District 1 is up in a given year, they only vote in that office and that's it. In a year where you may only have 1 or 2 districts that are up, you're now inviting additional voters into the mix with a bylaw vote. For an org like SBS, we do this every day. That's kind of an old hat for us, but thinking more in terms of your staff internally, there is additional workload that goes into managing that project, where you've got additional communications, probably additional meetings and other items that your staff is working on that's going to impact your bandwidth. And so with all that said, there was one pro, I should say, that kind of came up quite a bit. Matt, why don't you tackle that one here?
Well, this is the easy one, and the pro is it's the cost savings. Now, if you're combining both election and the bylaw vote into one, there is going to be cost savings, not only since it's going to be one main project and not 2 separate projects, but the other cost savings is going to be on postage as well. So there's only good things about combining them. If you know, for budget concerns and interest for the board, that would be a big one.
Absolutely. And who doesn't like saving money, especially when it comes to governance, right? So let's say you go through that process, right? You're going to update your bylaws. How do hybrid elections work is a question that we're commonly asked. And the first part of it usually boils down to scheduling, right? And what I would recommend is that if your organization is thinking about or in the process of updating your bylaws to allow additional voting options, I recommend that you look at the timeline from nominations through results and make sure that you plan accordingly. A lot of organizations who maybe voting takes place just at the annual meeting right now, the nomination or petition period will run up right against when voting typically begins. And if you're only doing voting at your annual meeting, that might not be that hard of a project or a logistical effort. However, if you start printing and mailing and you're mailing 15, 20, 25,000 ballots, you're going to want to give yourself enough time for the design, the printing, the mailing, and ultimately the testing as well to make sure that everything is in working order. Next are your voting options. Now, when we talk about hybrid elections and multiple options, there's a ton of them, right? Mail-in balloting, online, telephone, on-site, et cetera. And I'm here to say that you don't need to do every single option all at once. We have a number of organizations who will update the bylaws, add mail-in voting for the first year, then maybe add telephone or online in the second year. And then you can adjust accordingly too, depending on how members are participating. In any election that you have 2 or more voting options, it's really important to have mechanisms in place to prevent duplicate voting. So a firm like SBS, we have the technology that's in place to ensure that we adhere to that co-op principle of 1 member, 1 vote. And so if a member votes electronically and as by mail, we can flag that invalidate both of them or accept one or the other, depending on the rules of the co-op. Also, member security. As with any project with member data or something as sensitive as election results, you want to make sure that your partners that you're working with have processes in place to secure your data, whether it's being encrypted at rest and in transit, and also that any provider is SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. Lastly, reporting the results. Highly recommend that you do so as promptly as possible. So if you're an organization where voting takes place all the way up through your annual meeting, you announce results at your annual meeting, that's great. I would encourage you to also announce them digitally, put them out on social media, on your website, etc. If you're an organization that maybe has a gap in between when voting ends and results are announced, for example, a lot of orgs will say voting ends on the 1st, but ballots can be received up until the 3rd, and then the results are known on the 4th or the 5th. So if you're an organization like that, you want to make sure that when you announce the results, you explain that to your membership, so there's no question as to why voting ended a few days prior to results being announced. So Matt, that kind of walks us through what the co-op would experience in developing a hybrid election. Can you walk us through a little bit of what a member or a voter might experience?
Yeah, I'd gladly do that. And if you could stop sharing your screen and then I can pull up. Thank you, Tony. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen, and what you're going to see is basically what a member would see if they were at the login page to enter their credentials. And so this is a demo site, but you would have your company logo up here and then whatever you want to call your election. So if it's the 2021 director election, that's what it would be called. Now, there's a couple things before the member would even get to this page that I want to walk through. And let me just pull these over. So number one is when the co-op, if they're using a hybrid method or electronic method for voting, when the database gets sent over to us in the secure file transfer portal, they're going to create a column with an email address on file for that member. Now, if a member doesn't have an email address on file, that's perfectly fine. But ones that do, they're going to get a broadcast email when the election opens. And just to go through this sort of broadcast email, what you'll see right here at the top, this link right here is called an embedded login link. It's a very slick feature that most co-ops utilize, and it's actually going to increase your web participation. So what that is, it's unique to that particular member. And if they're on their smartphone, tablet, or desktop version, when they get that broadcast email, they're going to click it and it takes them directly into their ballot. And on here will also be the URL for the member if they want to utilize that, and then their member, their passcodes here. For this, it's a member number as a demo, but if you do proxies, it would say proxy number. And then lastly, if you are an NISC member, and if you're not, that's perfectly fine. But if you are, there's going to be information on here for how the member to access the ballot through Smart Hub. So the next thing would be is when the member receives their ballot package, if you're an anonymous election, you're going to have what's called like usually a number 11 outbound and a Baintel plus a secrecy envelope. Well, on that Baintel or that number 10 BRE is going to be information for the member to access the ballot online. So for this one, they give you the email address if they need to go to the co-op's email address, and usually on there's going to be like a vote now button for the member to click, and it'll direct them to the website. It's going to have their passcodes, and this one has a very nice feature where if you do have a smartphone and you pull up the camera options, it's a QR code. So basically it works just like that embedded login link. They hover over it and it'll take them directly into their ballot. Usually the site will pop up, you have to click it, and then you're in. If you're getting a paper ballot in the mail, and let's say you're not, an anonymous ballot, then it's usually in the top third, the voting instructions, but it'll let you know, vote by mail. If you're an NISC member, how to vote through Smart Hub, vote through Smart Hub to get to the access to the web ballot, and then voting online as well. So even if you're an NISC member and maybe you don't utilize Smart Hub, there's still instructions to get there. And then what's nice is it's really nice and big up here is their election passcodes. And this co-op does what we call a quick registration. So it's a 3 of 9 barcode. So if you utilize NISC, it would be the annual meeting registration tool. If you use the SBS registration tool, basically we give you a voter list when the election ends. And at registration, when your CSRs are checking members in, basically they scan that 309 barcode in, pulls up the members' information. It lets you know if they voted electronically or by paper. And then if they have, they wouldn't receive an on-site ballot. And if they haven't, they would receive an on-site ballot. And lastly, for the members that are NISC, if you're on the desktop version, basically once you log in using your own username and password that you know, and you click your account, if you're eligible to vote, you're going to see a Vote Now button, usually next between the Pay Now and the Report an Outage. If you're using the app version, once you log in, there's going to be a Vote Now button on the phone for them to click and then submit to get into the ballot. So what I'll do now is take you back to the login page. And so if I don't utilize any of those options, the SmartHub SSO, the QR code on the envelope, or that email that gets sent to me and use that embedded login link. If I don't have an email on file and I'm just using the site to get there, this is where they would come to. They type in their URL to get there, and then they're going to use their credentials to access the ballot. Now, like I said earlier, if I use SmartHub, it transitions you into this page. If I'm utilizing the embedded login link or the QR code, this is exactly where I come. And so I consider this the landing page. And what's nice about this is what we normally see is something either from the CEO, GM, or maybe the board president, thanking their members on voting, and then exactly, the importance of voting in your co-op election. There are voting instructions, but the site is extremely easy. So most people probably skip that and go straight to the ballot. So what I'll point out about the ballot is we can do as much as possible, a little as possible, within the web version. If you're electing president, board of directors, if you need a write-in option, we can do that. If you have bylaws, we can have that information on there. And then what's nice about this as well is, like we said earlier, not every co-op is the same. And so some co-ops allow that if a member uses their credentials, that signifies a signature. And some go, maybe an extra mile step or so that they might need to do is that they certify that they are saying who they are, and then they have to type in their name. And basically, once they type in their name, we collect that data, and then on the back end, we can check to make sure that's correct. But for View Bio, which is nice, is it can be in black and white if you need to. It can be in color for the picture. I can vote from this page. And then if I go back to the ballot, it's going to carry that information over. If I overvote and I'm not within parameters on the web ballot, it's going to let me know right away that I've selected too many options. If I would go to my ballot confirmation and try to submit my ballot, it's not going to let me because I'm not within parameters. So I have to go back and change my vote. If I need to do a write-in, like I said, we can do that. Another nice feature on this is the bylaw information. So it's a pane that would pop up for your members. This is in black text. However, if the co-op sends it to us, usually it's 3 colors. It's going to be the strike through is going to be in red. Any new verbiage is going to be in blue, and the verbiage that's stating the same would be in black. So as long as you send that to us in PDF format, that's what the member would see. So I'll click that. And then basically now, once I go to my ballot confirmation, I'm able to submit my ballot. As before, I only had to change votes because I wasn't in parameters. This would be the last time for the member to either change your vote. Once they submit it, those credentials are locked down and they're not able to get access back into the ballot. So this is a nice feature where the member could click here to print off their information on who they voted for. So what I will do is I will submit my ballot. And then this is a step that only members within that database that you provided to us at the beginning of the election, if they have an email on file, they would not see this page. What happens is the system on the back end automatically sends them a confirmation email. But this is nice because the person, if they want to get a confirmation email, they're able to type in their email address, and if they hit continue, they'll get a confirmation email. And what we can do on the back end at SBS is provide you the additional emails that maybe you didn't have on file within your database and provide that back to you at the end of the election. So I'll just say continue. And this is a feature that is in all the web-based products that we have for the electronic voting. It's free of charge. It's just something that we do. We thought it's a very nice process, but basically what it gives the member an opportunity to grade the system from very satisfied to very dissatisfied or no comment. They can type in up to 500 characters in length. What I will say is basically we are seeing a 97% or higher satisfied or very satisfied on this question. And then all of this is anonymous. So when we do receive that information, when you get it in your final report, it's anonymous. After the first year, sometimes the co-ops will change this for a question for management. So I'll submit this, and then this is the last thing that the member will see. Once they end the session on this, since it's a demo, the URL is going to take us back to the Survey and Ballot Systems website. What I see mostly for co-ops is they'll either take them, maybe to an annual meeting page or something that they want the member to see. So once you end session, it goes back to our website. Tony, I'll stop sharing and I'll kick it back to you.
All righty, thank you, sir. So I'll jump back in here. Just kind of to recap here as far as what next steps look like, right? So if you're, again, in the boat where your co-op is considering new voting methods or looking to change your bylaws to do so, what comes next? Well, like I mentioned earlier, we have a nice little document that we'll send out after the webinar here that will walk you through some of those step-by-step processes. But as a thumbnail, it basically boils down to a couple components. And the first is the legality of it. Matt mentioned earlier, engaging with your legal team, engaging with your attorneys, making sure that any changes that you're looking to make follow the state statutes and also are in adherence with state laws and also work within your bylaws, especially when it comes to updating the bylaws. Next is getting your board on board with making a change. And I know there's some orgs that's a little bit easier said than done. Sometimes it can take multiple meetings or multiple years in order to make a change, especially when it comes to the election. But what we'd recommend as far as best practices on that is to really do your due diligence, have a upfront conversation with the board as far as what options are available, any background information that you have gathered. Provide them resources from consultants, or if you have colleagues at other organizations or other co-ops who have made a change to their bylaws or changed their election process, ask them to take part in a meeting with your board to share that success story. Once they approve, again, if your organization needs the membership to then vote on it, there's no wrong way to promote your election. We always say that all the available channels that you have, I would use them. So if you have email, newsletter, we know of co-ops who have taken out radio ads or newspaper ads and things like that. Anywhere your members get information from the cooperative is a good place to promote your election. And as Matt mentioned earlier, some organizations, there may be quorum requirements that you need a high threshold of your members to participate and ultimately approve those changes. We have seen co-ops be very successful in offering incentives. Those can be from small bill credits for everybody who participates up to maybe a larger prize or two that is done in a drawing, and we can certainly help support that as well. So with that, we're right on time here. And Matt, we did get a few questions in during the presentation. So if you're up for it, I'll start with some Q&A.
That'd be great, Tony.
All right, let me see here. The first one that we got, Matt, why don't you take this one? It says, how does SBS handle the in-person paper ballots?
That's a really good question, Tony. So let's say your co-op basically has voting at annual meeting only, and you want SBS to come on site. We would bring our op scanner and then the ballots that you would give to your members, and we'd scan them and provide results. And let's say you utilize SBS for the early voting portion of your election. Before we come on site, we would send you on-site ballots that the members would only be able to utilize at the meeting. And then we'd also give you a voter list so that when your CSRs are checking your members in, And if you're using, your own system, or let's say the SBS registration tool, or if you're an NISC member, the annual meeting tool, basically when your CSR checks that member in, it would let them know if they voted by paper or electronically. And if they haven't, you would give them an on-site ballot. And then usually at most on-sites during registration, SBS is able to gather some of those ballots and tabulate. And so at the conclusion of the registration, it usually takes, once it closes and you do last call, it usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes to give you the final results to relay to your membership.
Perfect. This next question here, this is actually a two-part question. I'll tackle it. It says, can you explain in detail moving nominations online? And would every member be able to see each nominee and where they are in the process? So as we mentioned, a lot of co-ops are doing online nominations. Some are just putting it on their website as a downloadable form or a PDF, something along those lines. Those that are working with us, we're taking that form and building a customized website for nominations that the co-op then promotes to your members. So if I'm a person who's interested in running for office, I would go to the site, create a profile, and then start answering those questions within the website. So yes, no questions, upload your resume, upload a photo. Also too, if there's a petition process, it can have an electronic petition where each candidate gets a unique link that they can then share on social media, email, etc., and encourage other members to sign their petition so that they can make their way onto the ballot. The second part of the question is, does every member have access to it? The answer is no. Only the administrators from your organization would have access to it. And some co-ops will have a committee or a small group of people who are reviewing the applications or qualifying the candidates. You can have sub-administrators with our process so that they'd be able to review and track things just as much as an administrator would, but not every member who has access to the site would see the candidate submissions. We have a couple more in here, Matt. This one says, members who don't use the internet can feel left out of the process. How can we involve them?
Yeah, Tony, that's a really good question. It depends what type of election method you're utilizing, but let's say currently you're only voting at annual meetings. So currently members that show up to annual meeting are the only members that are engaged or ready to vote. Everyone else is really out of luck. So let's say you move to a hybrid method or you're doing a paper method and you're adding electronic to it. What we would advise is best practices is that year one, you're definitely going to keep the same. If you're going to send out a paper ballot, keep doing that to everyone. And in the hybrid method, adding electronic is only going to reach out to the members that maybe haven't been engaged before because they haven't sent back a paper ballot. They might be able to vote electronically and cast their ballot. And for the members that, or you might think that will be left behind, they're still going to get that paper ballot in that full hybrid method. And then what we've seen in the transition plan is maybe year 2 or 3, you sort of cut back on the paper ballots. But what I see some co-ops doing is still allowing members to maybe request a paper ballot during their election. And so those members could call into either the co-op or to SBS and request a paper ballot, and we'd be able to send them that to them for them to get that. I know a lot of people, it's feeling that in their hands and they like that part of the process.
Absolutely. And so we got one more question in here. So it says, with the younger generation, email is somewhat of an archaic way of communication. Is there any thought for this communication to change to a text message? And the answer is yes. So some of our platforms, we have text invites. When it comes to elections, I know that some organizations have different rules and parameters around who can receive text and who can't, but a lot of co-ops will use the same process they do for like outage alerts and things like that. If you're an NISC co-op, you could certainly use that system and then direct folks to log in to Smart Hub. But I would also say, again, when it comes to communication, email, text messages is great, but don't forget about all of your members who are out there. Different members have different preferences on how they want to receive updates from the cooperative. So don't leave out some of the more traditional ones. And again, just the more you can communicate the process about when your election is coming up, why it's important that they participate, is all going to be for the greater good, to help members learn about the process and encourage them to vote. So with that, that wraps up all the questions that we had from today's session. Just want to again say thank you to everybody who participated. If you'd like to learn more about SBS, you could certainly visit us at our website, 𝐸_and_ballot_systems.com. Again, we certainly appreciate everyone taking the time, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.